Hi, welcome to Chapter 10 in Business English. Today we're going to look at colons, traveling with colons, and pronouns. So what exactly are colons? How we use them also. Colons appear at the end of an independent clause when followed by a list or an explanation. So it doesn't have to necessarily just be a list. It can be an explanation of the actual independent clause. So here we go. This is Rule 10.1. Place a colon after the phrase as follows. The following, if they introduce a list or an explanation. Right? Here he is. We are interested in entering the following countries. So when you see those two words, the following, not countries necessarily, but the following, you'll know that there's going to be something that's going to follow. So there's a colon right there. Right? And here's your list. Australia, New Zealand, and Thailand. Okay? So that is Rule 10.1. When place a colon after the phrase as follows or the phrase the following if they introduce a list or an explanation. Here we have an example of the following. All right. Time and proportions. This is Rule 10.2. Place a colon between the hours and the minutes when the time is expressed in figures. So as you can see, an example, 7:30 a.m., there is your colon. 9:10 p.m., there is your colon. A colon is used to represent the word to in expressing proportions. So here also 2 to 1, right? So the actual colon here is representing the word to. So you can actually, the ratio is 2 to 1. You can actually put the word to there and it will mean the same thing. Okay? So, colon usage, this is, let me just check and make sure, 10.2. It doesn't say, but this is 10.3. Use a colon after an independent clause that introduces a quotation of 3 or more lines. So here we are. So if we have a quotation here, it's an example. Here's the advice given to travelers in your new edition of the travel guide. You can see where the colon is and the text that will follow. Certainly the lines are empty here, but usually you'll have text here and it tells you what follows. So you need a colon there. That is 10.3. I apologize for not having indicated, but in your book you will have that. Also here's 10.4. Salutation. Place a colon after a salutation in business correspondence. So here is a salutation, dear Miss Johnson, and you can put your colon right there. Okay. A lot of people put commas. You can, in certain circumstances, put commas, but usually in business, right, you don't put a comma. You put a colon. All right. So let's keep going. Let's take a closer look and go back a little bit and just look at pronouns. Pronoun is a word that is used to replace a noun. The form of the pronoun depends on its use in the sentence. So you have 3 types of pronouns: subjective, objective, and possessive. A pronoun that is subjective, right, is opposition to the subject, right? Subject of the verb. Objective is the object of the verb, indirect object of the verb, object of preposition, or the object of infinitive. We'll take a look at them in a second. The third one is possessive, and it's very simple, shows possession, right? So let's go back to subjective. Subjective is always, like it says, the subject of the verb. I, we, you, and so on. Objective, me, us, you, him, her, it. These are objective. In a sentence, you never say me, I am, me am, or me right at the beginning, because that me doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. It sounds kind of weird saying it right now, but it just doesn't fit, right? So you can't put me as a subject. It's always I'm coming home, right? So this is it. I is subjective, objective is me. Just remember those two, and you'll have a good understanding of the rest. We and us for sure. The only one that really crosses both borders here, subjective and objective, is the infamous you, one of the most famous words or infamous words of the English language. Possessive, very simply, you possess. My, mine, our, ours, and all the rest there are there. The one that you really have to pay attention to is the whose. Whose is a word that's not used very often in the English language, believe it or not, but it is a possessive pronoun. Okay? That is rule 10.5. There are 3 different types of pronouns, right? But there's even more. Whom, that, and which. These are interrogative pronoun. Is used in a sentence that asks a question. Who, whom, right? Who will attend a sales meeting? To whom shall I send the invoice, right? These are interrogative pronouns, right? Now, relative pronouns introduce a dependent clause within a sentence, right? So now the same words are also relative pronouns, right? So the pronoun refers back to the noun in the independent clause. The form who, whom, is determined on how it is used within its clause. Whom refer to people, whom refer to people, that which refers to things. These are what you have to remember. Who, whom, and that which are relative pronouns, right? And they're also in the clause of the sentence. All right, so let's keep going. Here we got 10.6, direct question. In a direct question, the pronoun who is used in the sentence. So if you have to label a direct question to someone, the word you always have to start with is who. Who plans to visit the national parks this year? Subjective case here for sure. Who is subjective, right? But this is a direct question. You use the word who. Note, use who whenever he, she, they, I, or we could be substituted. These are subjective, as it says right there, right? Not objective. A lot of information in the last couple of chapters, which will certainly be part of the exam in a couple of weeks. Interrogative sentence, whom and whomever. So 10.7, in an interrogative sentence, whom is used if it appears in the objective case. Always, when it's objective case, it's whom, not who. Who is subjective. Whom did you sign up for the trip? You signed up him, whom, right? It's not you. You didn't sign up you signed up him. When it's you, it would be who as a pronoun. But in this case, because it's objective, you signed him, whom, for the trip. Use whom, very simply, whenever him, her, them, me, or us could be substituted as the object of the verb or as the object of the preposition, right? As we saw before, right? Subjective versus objective. When it's subjective, it's who. When it's objective, it's whom. Always look and replacing will answer you the question. So here you would answer the question, whom did you sign up for the trip? You signed him. You signed her, right? So her is the object of the sentence. You is the subject of the sentence. Who did the signing? You did. Okay. 10.8, subordinate clause. The pronoun who is used as the subject of a verb in a subordinate clause, right? Blanca is the client who is planning a trip to Canada. Who is the subject of the verb is planning in the subordinate clause. Who relates back to the client, right? Blanca is the client. That is a independent clause. Then you've got who is planning a trip to Canada. This is the subordinate clause. It's subordinates. The Blanca is the client. Who is planning? Who is Blanca? Blanca is the client. And what's going on? Who is planning a trip to Canada? Who is the subject of the verb is planning in the subordinate clause. Who relates back to the client? Client, right, relates back to Blanca. That is a subordinate clause. So who and whom are used in many different applications. Here's another one, 10.9. Object of a verb preposition. The pronoun whom is used again as the object of a verb or a preposition, objective case. All the time, whom is always objective. The applicant whom I interviewed, right, will accept the job offer. Whom is the object of the verb interviewed in the subordinate clause. I interviewed her. Whom, right? The applicant here is whom. Do you know anyone with whom we can discuss cruise vacations? Whom again is the object of the preposition with. With whom? Check. We can discuss with him cruise vacations. In other words, all you've got to do in subjective or objective to find out if they are pronouns, if they are objective, or if you can subject or change it to whom or him, or who I should say, is replace it. When you see him, right away it tells you that is not subjective. This is objective. You know, if you have to turn this into a question, you would have to use whom. All right, that is 10-point noun. This is a little tougher. This is 10.10. So pronouns that and which, right? That and which are relative pronouns. That refers to people or things. Which refers to things. Always use which when introducing a non-restrictive, non-essential clause. We talked about this before. Whenever you see non-essential, that means you can take it out of the sentence and the sentence is still clear and it still has information that you could use, that you would need which. That is generally used to introduce a restrictive essential clause. That means it's needed for you in that sentence to pass on the message. So here we go. The European tour, and there's always a comma. Remember the comma before which, right? Not before that. The European tour, comma, which was scheduled for next month, was canceled. Which was scheduled for next month is non-restrictive. That means it could be removed. This is a non-restrictive clause. Which was scheduled for next month is a non-restrictive clause. You can pop that out, right? The European tour was canceled, right? That's enough. It's essential. Now here, the island, no comma, that we visited last month was beautiful, right? Now you're going to say, if I take off this restrictive clause, which is that we visited last month, the sentence still makes sense. The island was beautiful. Yes, it does. But it's restrictive because you're trying to make a point on a specific island on a specific time of year, right, that you visited. So you need to have this here to make it clear, right? So it all depends what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say it, if it's restrictive or if it's non-restrictive, right? Because you could say here very simply, the European tour that was scheduled for next month was canceled. Is that correct? It is, if you would consider that this clause is essential to your sentence. Here also, the island, which we visited last month, was beautiful. So you're emphasizing the beautiful here, not the visited last month, okay? So when you want to emphasize something in a sentence, right, it's got to be that. When you don't want to emphasize, it's just extra information, and you want to make it clear that here what you want to say is canceled, then you would use which. Okay, a little tougher rule there. And the last one, 10.11, a lot of rules in this chapter. Pronouns and gerunds. That word is pronounced gerunds. 10.11, use the possessive form of the pronoun when it precedes a verb ending in ing. Ing tells you right away that it's a gerund, right? So here we go. I approve your writing the summary report, right? Writing is a gerund, right? So it precedes a verb ending right here. Her winning the tournament was a surprise, right? This is the gerund. So in other words, use the possessive form of the pronoun, right? Your, her, of the pronoun when it precedes a verb ending in ing. So here we have, I approved your writing, the summary report, writing here, right? This is your possessive form of the pronoun. Her winning the tournament was a surprise, right? Her winning the tournament was a surprise. This is the possessive form of the pronoun. This is your gerund. A little tougher rule to end the rules in chapter 10. Certainly, if you do the exercises, you need to do the exercises in chapter 10 to really understand them. And then after that, we can go over them certainly in the near future. And I'll leave you with this pronoun usage review, right? The directions are to select the correct form of the pronoun. So certainly you've got the answers there that will help you, but try them before you actually look at that, right? Sounds good. Thank you very much. And I will post everything for you when it comes to the quizzes and to the practicums to make sure that you understand what this is when it comes to the gerunds, especially Rule 10.11. Thank you.